So I was doing some study in the book of Numbers just a little while ago, and I came across something that I thought was very interesting. Now, I want to make it very clear that this is just kind of several various thoughts that I'm kind of stringing together. I'm not saying this is necessarily what it is. I'm saying this is what makes sense to me as I start to put the pieces together. This is kind of the picture that forms. It could be that any one of these little mini conclusions that I have that I'm building together to make my ultimate conclusion. It could be that one of those little conclusions is incorrect, and I haven't discovered that yet, haven't studied it deep enough yet. And if so, that would mean that everything else just kind of unravels. But as far as I can tell, I think I'm right about every individual piece. It may be that I am right about all these individual pieces, and they still don't all go together. But this is what makes sense to me in my head. In Numbers chapter 21, we are told about a time when the Israelite people are wandering in the wilderness, and they start to rebel and criticize God. It says in Numbers 21 verse 5, the people spoke against God and against Moses, saying, "Wherefore have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither any water, and our soul loathes this light bread." So they complain because they don't have good enough food to satisfy their high expectations. They have food. God has given them manna, and they have had food and drink to enjoy, but they're tired of the same old, same old. They want more, and they want greater, and they want better, and God has given them what sustains them, and they want something special. Never mind the fact the only reason they're wandering is because they're being punished for their lack of faith. So here they are complaining and criticizing, and this is not the first time. They've complained and criticized countless times before, but God has had up to here and then some, and so now he's going to punish the people. As he's done in the past, he will do here again. And this is what Moses writes that God's going to do to the people. Numbers 21 verse 6. The Lord sent, my Bible says, fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many of the children of Israel died. That word, fiery serpents, is an interesting one to me. It is in fact the Hebrew word seraph. Now, you may not be familiar with that term. Maybe that does ring a bell to you. But this is Numbers chapter 21. The word seraph appears. We read about this same name in Isaiah chapter 6. The seraph is mentioned there in a plural form, seraphim, where Isaiah the prophet goes up into the throne of God and he beholds the majesty of the divine. He sees God sitting on his throne and the train filling the temple, and he sees angels hovering around God. And in fact, he specifically describes a kind of angel that is floating near God. He describes the angel almost exclusively in terms of its wings. It has 6 wings, in fact. This seraphim is described as having 2 wings to cover its eyes so that it cannot see and look upon the incredible majesty of God's holiness. It has 2 other wings that cover its feet. 2 wings cover its feet so that it does not stand on the holy ground wherein is God's throne. There are 2 more wings with which it flies, as it flies around and orbits the throne of God, chanting, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts." And so here you have this picture of this angel, this angelic being called a seraphim, as they fly around God's throne, singing, "Holy, holy, holy." What's interesting to me is in this description of Isaiah 6, Isaiah does not give us anything in the middle. What's going on in those wings? We know that it has eyes and it has feet, if you will, but we don't have any picture of what it looks like on the inside. I imagine most people visualize something humanoid with a head and with shoulders and a torso and with legs and so forth. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. There are angels that appear to people looking like people. You can see the 2 angels that appear at the resurrection tomb when Jesus is already raised and the tomb is empty. They're standing there in white apparel. They're not even described as having wings, but we know that they're angels. That's the only logical conclusion to reach, is that they are angels. But this is a different kind of angel. This one has wings. But Isaiah does not describe its body. Maybe it's because I didn't draw it well enough, and the wings that cover the eyes and the wings that cover the feet completely cover the whole body, and so he could never see what was in there. But either way, he doesn't describe it. But this is the same word described as here. And here, the word is translated as fiery serpents. Now, maybe it's just a bad translation. Maybe God sent seraphim, angels, to punish the people, to smite the people, to do his bidding, as he does with angels and has in the past and will again in the Bible. So maybe that's all it is. Except it specifically says that they bite the people. I have a hard time imagining. It's just hard for me to imagine people looking angels, like the angels from the end of the gospel record at the empty tomb. Those kind of angels running up to people and biting them. It makes more sense that serpents do the biting because serpents bite. And yet they're described as angelic beings. Now, hold that thought, because I have another idea that, again, these may not be related at all, but as I'm just putting these thoughts together, this is what comes to me. At the end of Revelation, among all the different ways that various things are described, the devil is described in one way as a red dragon. The devil is described as a red dragon. Now, we see this word dragon, and our minds probably envision something that looks like a traditional Western version of a dragon from fairy tales. So you have a dragon that looks something like this. Something like this. Right? It has a wing. It looks kind of like a dinosaur. It's big old feet. It's got wings that flies with. It spits fire. Maybe sometimes they're described as having, four-legged. Sometimes they're more like bats in that their hands are attached to their wings. Sometimes the wings are separate. It depends on the version. But this is the dragon that most people in the Western Hemisphere think of when we think of a dragon. This is like your Lord of the Rings kind of dragon, or this is your Game of Thrones kind of dragon. This is your Pete the Dragon from the Disney movie. This is your traditional looking kind of dragon. The King Arthur dragon from the cartoon movie, the Sword in the Stone animated movie, looked like this dragon. This is what an Englishman would have imagined, something like this, when he thought of a dragon. But John was not an Englishman. John was not of the Western Hemisphere. John was of Asia. It was Western Asia, but it was still Asia. And the Asian dragon simply looks different. It does not look like this. In fact, if it looked like anything, it would look more like that. There would be smaller hands and feet and a more serpentine-like body. It wouldn't have these big brontosaurus-like legs. It wouldn't have these giant wings. It may have smaller wings. That's kind of the way, like if you see the dragons in Chinese parades, right? Something like that. They look kind of like that. They don't necessarily spit fire. They have like big long whiskers, That's kind of like the dragon that's more like the Asian style dragon. Well, that's what John would have thought when he describes the devil as a red dragon. Drakon in the Greek. That's this right here, right? Well, follow me here. This is a serpentine creature, a snake-like creature. And this is at the end of the Bible, Revelation. The devil is described like this. How is the devil described in the beginning of the Bible? In Genesis, the devil is described as a serpent that goes to tempt Eve. Now, in the Genesis record, after the devil succeeds in tempting Adam and Eve, and they stumble and they fall, and they're punished by God, in the course of that, in Genesis 3, as God is kind of doling out his punishments, he says man is going to have to suffer by toiling in the fields, woman is going to suffer by having pain in childbirth, but then he also calls out the serpent. He calls out the serpent, and he says, you will have to eat dust. You will not be permitted to walk on the earth, but you will have to crawl on your belly. Now, if a serpent has to be told it's going to from now on crawl on its belly, that means this serpent was not originally crawling on its belly. It was using legs. It was walking. It is a serpent with feet, and it walked, which would have looked like the traditional Asian style dragon. So now try and put all this together. You have the devil described in the book of Genesis as coming to Adam and Eve in the form of a serpent that could walk, and that later its ability to walk was taken away from it, and it was forced to slither like a serpent, right? Maybe it's the case that the devil, who for a process of elimination we conclude was a fallen or is a fallen angel, because he ain't God, he's not man. That's kind of what else is left, right? He is a created being, so he's not eternal, but he was around either just before or around the same time that man was created. So he's a created being, but he's not man. Process of elimination, he's an angelic kind of being who's no longer an angel on God's side. The devil and his angels, you would assume, is those angels that follow the devil, who was an angel. So here you have kind of putting all this together. The devil being a serpent. Maybe the devil was a seraph. Maybe the devil, once upon a time, looked like the kind of angel that Isaiah saw. Maybe what was in between those wings was something that was serpentine, that has feet and hands, but they're covered up by the 6 wings, or the 4 wings and the 2 with which it flies. Maybe the seraphim is a serpentine-like being with wings that sings the praises of God. And then on the occasion of Numbers 21, some of which were sent down to the Israeli camp and started to bite the people, because they are, in fact, serpent-like creatures. They have teeth and they would bite the people. And maybe the devil himself, described as a red dragon, a red serpentine creature, himself walked on the earth and tempted and caused man and woman to fall. And then God punished them by clipping his wings and removing its ability to walk, and forced it to slither on the ground like a snake and all its snakely descendants. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm not saying this is the Bible proof of what the devil is. I'm just saying, as I look at all of the picture of the Bible, I look at these different elements here from Revelation, from Numbers, from Genesis, and from Isaiah, and they kind of all come together, and I can see ways in which they relate. That maybe that's how you describe who the devil was, what the devil maybe looked like, if you will, and what form he first took when he tempted man. Maybe he looked like the Asian dragon that John depicted in Revelation, a red dragon, a serpentine-like creature who once upon a time caused man to sin, the class of which still serves God, many of whom, and were sent at one point in Numbers 21 to punish the people. People are always interested and they're curious about angels. There's very little said in detail about angels. They're all over the Bible. They're always written in a kind of a matter-of-fact way, as if it's just understood that they serve God. But we know there are fallen angels. We presume the devil is one of them. And so questions are always there about who is the devil? What does he look like? What did he do before he fell? I think we have hints that maybe can put a picture together. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. What we know about the devil that's most important, the one thing we can all understand, is that he is not your friend. He is your enemy. And John's description of him as a red devil, as a red dragon who seeks to destroy you and your soul, it's probably all the description that we absolutely have to have. Nevertheless, that's just my theory. God bless.